So I had weight loss surgery. It's something that I've been thinking about and planning for a long time, and it finally happened. My surgery date was October 30th, 2024, and the procedure I had is called the SADI-S. So I'm planning to record regular post-op updates moving forward. So if that's something you'd like to know about, like my personal experience with the SADI, definitely be on the lookout for those. But since the surgery I had is not super well known, I thought the best place to start could be to go over what the SADI procedure is, some of the pros and cons about it, and why I chose the SADI-S as my weight loss surgery. I'm Joel, and welcome to Joel Gets So the SADI-S stands for Single-Anastomosis Duodeno-ileal Bypass with Sleeve Gastrectomy, which I know is a mouthful. Sometimes online you can also hear it referred to as a loop DS, a modified DS, sometimes even the acronym SIPS. I'm just going to call it a SADI. Doctors, can we get some branding people on this to kind of like figure out what we're going to call it? Now, there are 5 bariatric procedures endorsed by the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. They are the adjustable gastric band, the sleeve gastrectomy, the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, the SADI-S, and the duodenal switch. You can think of these procedures as least aggressive to most aggressive in terms of the extent of the surgery and how much weight the patient is expected to lose. This makes the SADI one of the more aggressive surgeries, and it's also the newest procedure on the list. It was first developed around 2007, and it was officially endorsed by the ASMBS in 2020. Even though it's a relatively new procedure, it was created as a modification of the duodenal switch, which has been around since the late 80s. So what is the SADI? Well, for years, the 2 most popular bariatric surgeries have been the sleeve gastrectomy and the gastric bypass. So if you're familiar with weight loss surgery at all, it's probably one of those 2. In a way, the SADI and the duodenal switch are sort of a combo of both of those procedures because they have a sleeve stomach and they also have an intestinal bypass. So basically, the SADI has 2 parts. The first part is the sleeve gastrectomy. This is where they remove about 70 to 80% of the stomach and make a smaller tube-shaped stomach similar to the shape of a banana. The second part is an intestinal bypass. The small intestine is divided just after the stomach, and a lower loop of intestine is brought up and connected to the stomach, essentially bypassing a portion of the intestines. So why is this effective? With all bariatric surgeries, weight loss happens for one of 3 reasons: food restriction, hormonal impacts, or malabsorption. The SADI works because of all 3 of these reasons. When the stomach is sleeved, this causes food restriction, meaning you're physically unable to eat as much food. But there's also a huge hormonal impact. The hunger hormone ghrelin decreases, and hormones like GLP-1 increase, which makes you less hungry and makes you feel full for longer. The SADI also has a malabsorption component, which comes from the bypass in the intestines, meaning the body's no longer able to absorb as many calories from the food that you eat. So that's what the SADI is, but what are some of the pros and cons of the SADI compared to other bariatric surgeries? Well, if you compare it to the 2 most popular bariatric procedures, the sleeve and the gastric bypass, the SADI has better long-term weight loss results. By that, I mean that most people will lose more weight with the SADI than with the sleeve or the bypass, and they'll keep it off for longer. I'll leave some links in the description of the video if you'd like to dig deeper, but in one study that I found, SADI-S patients had kept off an average of 80% of their excess weight after 10 years, compared with sleeve gastrectomy patients who on average had kept off about 50% of their excess weight at 10 years. Now, for years, the surgery with the best long-term weight loss results has been the duodenal switch. But as I mentioned earlier, the SADI was developed as a modification of the DS, and it was meant to get much of the same weight loss benefits of the DS while simplifying the surgery and reducing some of the risks and side effects. So those would be some of the pros of the SADI versus the duodenal switch. The sleeve gastrectomy has a moderately high risk for developing acid reflux, but that seems to be less of a concern with the SADI. This may be because the sleeve stomach in the SADI is slightly larger than that of the sleeve gastrectomy. Gastric bypass has some specific cons, such as not being able to take NSAID medications for life and increased risk of dumping syndrome. These issues are not really a concern with the SADI. So what are some of the cons? Well, it is a more aggressive surgery, so it's mainly appropriate for morbidly obese patients who need to lose over 100 pounds. It also has more malabsorption than the sleeve and the gastric bypass, so that means more vitamins for the rest of your life. It's also slightly less aggressive than the duodenal switch, so if the only goal is to lose the most amount of weight possible and keep it off for as long as possible, the duodenal switch may be the way to go. There's also some gastrointestinal side effects that can be more common with the SADI and the DS than with the sleeve or the bypass, so particularly more loose and frequent bowel movements is one symptom. It's also a relatively new procedure, so even though it's based on a well-established procedure from the late 80s, there's still some risk in the long-term impacts. So ultimately, why did I choose the SADI for myself? Well, the biggest priority for me was the long-term weight loss outcomes. If I was going to take this massive step of having surgery, I wanted it to make a major impact in my health for a long time to come. I also have a lot of weight to lose. My heaviest weight is 435 pounds, so I'm looking to ultimately lose more than half my body weight. These two reasons alone made me focus my decision between the SADI or the duodenal switch. Now, when I started to compare the two, I also factored in a third priority, which is related to the name of this channel, getting swole. After I've lost most of my excess weight, I would ultimately like to work on building up some muscle. Now, I'm not planning on being a competitive bodybuilder or anything, but I've been greatly inspired by stories of people like Ethan Suplee or Obese to Beast and many others who were once morbidly obese, but not only lost a ton of weight, but they built up their bodies with strength training and muscle mass. And that's the piece for me that makes this journey about more than just removing fat, but adding muscle and fitness. Now, obviously, one thing you need when you're building muscle is protein, and the aggressive malabsorption of the duodenal switch made me a little concerned that it would be tough for me to consume the calories and the protein to ultimately build muscle mass. Now, to be clear, I think it still might be difficult with the SADI because there's significant malabsorption to that surgery as well. And it's not to say that someone who has the duodenal switch won't be able to build muscle. Just for me, the SADI felt like the right balance between long-term weight loss and keeping the door open for future muscle growth. So that's why the SADI-S felt like the right decision for me. And now that I've actually had the surgery, the real journey begins. So as I've said before, I'm planning to post regular updates on my post-op journey. So if there's anything you'd like me to discuss, questions you want me to answer or cover in a future video, please let me know in the comments. Of course, nothing in the video is meant to represent medical advice, so if you're considering the SADI or any other bariatric surgery, I recommend discussing it with your doctor. And if you found value in this content, please consider subscribing so you won't miss any future updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.